Now, I've always been a little obsessed with small computers, small form factor, small price, small power usage. And what I wanted to cover in this video is actually a recent build that I did that is exactly all of those things. And it is a 200 GE Athlon from AMD, part of the Ryzen 1 series, so very similar to the 3000G that was just released by AMD. And I actually wanted to try and do a low budget, low power, and in this case, not low performance mini PC. So let's go ahead and dive into this a little bit deeper. First up is the case. Now you'll see it's a CUK USA. Pick this one up off of Amazon. Now this is a micro ATX sized case, but if you look at it, it's actually really small. In fact, for comparison, I've got my 6950 video card, and this video card is about the same size. Look at this. So this is a tiny case. And in fact, if we look side by side, there's no way this graphics card is going to be able to fit into this case. So no graphics card unless you find something very, very small that is easily modifiable, because there's no place for it actually inside the case for it to come out. So you have to do some modifications if you're thinking about getting a graphics card into this case. That's where the AMD Ryzen with built-in Vega graphics, that's where those chips come into play really well, because they have built-in graphics capability and the capability to do some very lightweight gaming. Now, the 200 GE is actually the lowest of the lowest of the lowest. I got this thing for $40, open box off Amazon. And I think the 3000G that was just launched is $50 brand new. So low budget here, but a lot of power in this little thing. And I'm gonna actually walk it through a couple different games and we'll sort of see how it plays out. Now, let's talk about the rest of the build. So the internals, okay. So you'll notice that I've actually got everything jammed into this tiny case already. So the SSD, it just has to float around in here. There's no real place to mount that. The case actually comes with a 200 watt power supply. Now, I'm gonna guess that it's actually more in the range of 150 is what you'd wanna top it out at. But I've already done a little bit of power testing, and the 200 GE, when it's running, even at full tilt, 45, 50 watts at the wall. So well within range here. Additionally, I've got 2 sticks of DDR4 memory that run at 2666, and that's basically limited by the CPU itself. Stock CPU fan, nice low profile, fits inside the case. I mean, anything bigger than that, and you're gonna have struggles getting it in there. And then the motherboard itself is an MSI A320M, and this is the Pro VD Plus. Now, here's where I made a little mistake. I didn't do a ton of reading about it. I just picked the least expensive micro ATX motherboard that would fit into this case. And I read up that you need to have one that only takes 2 sticks of RAM, because you could see here, very tight fit. If you were to actually try and put any bigger of a motherboard in here, it's just not gonna fit. So 4 sticks of RAM, not gonna happen. So you gotta find a motherboard that only takes 2 sticks of memory. On top of that, this motherboard, and like many of these different motherboards, come with different I/O, right? Different outputs on the back. And you can see I've got a VGA as well as a DVI. But what's missing here? No HDMI. Not necessarily a bad thing. DVI can support all sorts of great resolutions, except the 200 GE does not actually support DVI out through any of the motherboards that it's placed into. I've run into this, it's weird, it's crazy, I'm not sure why there's this limitation. Long story short, I have to use VGA right now. I am looking to find another $40 or $50, maybe a A350 motherboard, so I could actually overclock the CPU as well, put the 3000G in here and see how it does, because not having HDMI is just a bit of a killer here. And you'll see that during the testing, I'm limited in the resolutions I can even try to test based on the limitation of this motherboard. So a little bit of a fail there. I would highly recommend paying a little bit more for a motherboard that, 1, will fit in the case, of course, but then 2, has an HDMI out, because without HDMI, just a huge pain here. But beyond that, great little machine, great little box. Now let's go ahead and start actually testing it out and see how it goes. Okay. So I've got it all set up on the desktop now, and it is a desktop that actually can fit onto the desktop. And before I turn it on, I'm actually gonna plug it into a kilowatt so that while I'm actually using the machine, we can monitor how much power it's using. So I'm gonna try and find a way to get it actually up on the desktop here, maybe right in this area, so that we can all see how much power it's using while I'm running through a couple different tests. I forgot to plug in my mouse and keyboard. Mouse and keyboard. And remember, whenever you're plugging in USB, you're gonna have to try 3 or 4 times. Cool. All right, we're sitting at the desktop. Average power usage, as you can see, hovering around 30 to 35. All right, so now I've fired up Destiny 2, and I can already tell this is going to be a little bit of a struggle because just sitting at the opening screen here, 30 frames a second. But let's go ahead and adjust the resolution and jump into a game and see how it plays out. Okay, so I just finished running through Destiny 2, and at 720p, 50% resolution scale, you're pulling 55, 60 sometimes frames per second on average, while pulling about 55 to 45 watts from the wall. So overall, I'd say it's playable if you enjoy going back to graphics that look like the original Xbox. So, you know, win some, lose some. Long story short, definitely playable, definitely not fun to play. Or fun to play, but not pretty to look at. I think that that's really going to be the deciding factor here. I'm really looking forward to the latest Ryzen chips that'll be coming out soon that have a much stronger graphics processor on them. You know, if you imagine a 6-core that has maybe in the range of the old 470, RX 470 or the RX 480 performance, so 570, 580 performance, or even just the 560, you'd be able to play 1080p low settings and pull 60 frames per second. So I'm really looking forward to that. So, you know, gaming wise, I'd say this thing definitely good for lighter weight titles, older titles. Borderlands, I mean, I was able to play at 1080p and then even decrease it a little bit to just get a better experience. Destiny 2, you're playing at like 480p, so not really a great experience. Let's actually talk about the build then. what is positive and negative about the build? Once again, going back to the very beginning here, the motherboard, I would absolutely recommend something with HDMI, especially if you're looking at the 200G or the 3000G, right? The lower end APUs, you're gonna want HDMI out on the motherboard. If you're going with this tiny little case, it's fantastic, but be sure that you will only choose an mATX motherboard that has 2 RAM slots, right? Because 4 RAM slots, it's not gonna fit. Additionally, one thing I will note, during my initial test with this specific case, the power supply went out in it. So I had to return it and get a new one. Luckily, the process was very easy. I had purchased through Amazon. I just repurchased through Amazon and returned the other one as defective. But it maybe lasted a grand total of 2 hours of testing before it blew up. This one's lasted now for months. So I've had this computer for a while. And it's been great, it's been solid. I've put it through its paces. I've tried to play with it in all sorts of different ways, and it's been fine. So the just sort of a note there of what I experienced during testing. But overall, really fun little build. Looking forward to the newer processor so that I can get a little bit more performance out of this machine. And I'm gonna go ahead and overlay some performance numbers that I saw during testing here. And of course, you can always check the video. I'll put a little fast scrubber in there so that you can see the wattage live as I'm playing some of these games without getting too bored by me playing games that you guys can go out and play yourself. All right, well, I hope that you enjoyed this walkthrough of the 200G micro ATX build. Total part cost, I'm gonna go ahead and put that up on the screen here as well, what you could buy it for today. I paid a tiny bit more for this. Realistically, the price has been fairly steady on these lower end boards. The memory prices have come down quite a bit. The newer Ryzen chips should push some of these prices down just a little bit on the older hardware, but I would recommend just picking up a inexpensive board and then grab a newer Ryzen processor. All right, it's been great.